questions about compensating a saddle? What is it? Do I have to do it? Should I do it? The answer is maybe, no. Not all guitars are gonna need compensation. But in order to help you understand what we're talking about, it has to do with, number one, the scale length of the guitar. Now when we talk about scale length, it's basically from the nut to the 12th fret times 2. In Martin, we'll often call them short scale, long scale, 24/9 short scale, long scale 25/4. Gibson's will be 24/7. Scale length for this discussion is going to be irrelevant. What is going to matter is how do I know and what do I do? Well, the first thing you got to do is know the scale length, because you can't assume that the bridge is always where it belongs. So, the position of the nut can also be known as the 0 fret. That is the beginning of everything. Now, there's a number of different ways of doing this. There are compensated nuts, compensated saddles, there's the Buzz Feiten system. There's so many different ways to do this. And you need to know that you are not, no matter how hard you try, you are not going to have a perfectly intonated instrument on every fret, on every string, on the neck of the guitar. It's not going to happen. And why isn't it going to happen? Well, number one, we're talking a static dimension. This scale length does not change. The compensation length will change in that we are going to have a given point from 0 to 12 times 2 plus a little. Now what that's going to do is help us match the working length of the string to the static dimension of the scale length. Now the variabilities involved here are many. We have the variability of string gauge, we have the variability of the alloy of the string. What's the string height? What's the relief of the neck? All of these will come into play. Playing technique is also another variability. So, how do I know and where do I go? So, I start by measuring from the nut to here, the 12th fret, double it, and then I basically go from the nut up. There are some jigs that are based on the 12th fret, set it on the 12th fret and come on up to the saddle. What I don't like about that is if you have a mistake between here and the 12th fret, it's going to be doubled somewhere. So by doing it this way, I'm going to follow the line of the string. Now I do know that this being a Martin guitar, we're talking a 25/4 scale. So if my buddy comes and measures here, following the line of the first string to the bridge, you can see that it is just a hair over 25 3/8. 25 3/8 is going to be decimal point 25.375. This is a little bit more, so we probably are at the point 4, 25/4 to the front of the saddle. Along the 6th string, or the bass C, we measure that and we're going to find that we're going to be 1/8 of an inch more than position 1. Now what does that do for you? Now a lot of people, early people, will probably take the scale length times 2 and that's where they put their saddle. Then they find out that, uh-oh, I'm short. So you end up having a sharp guitar, and at that point there's not much you can do except pull the saddle, re-slot it, move the saddle back. Now in most cases the human ear can be fooled about a flat note easier than it can be a sharp note. Sharp notes tend to be a little bit more sticky to the human ear. Unless you're gifted or cursed with perfect pitch. I fortunately am not one of them. So as long as I'm within 3-4%, or what we will call cents, to me, in my ear, it sounds pretty good. Probably one reason I got kicked out of all the bands I played in. So, with that, here's what I want to do. Measure here to here, multiply 2, give myself a little bit of compensation following that line of the string. So, you do that, you glue your bridge in, you have the saddle at that position, you play a note. If your action height is high, as you pull the string, you're going to make it go sharp. Well, if you make something go sharp, now we can compensate on the saddle and make the note a little bit longer. Depending upon your playing style, for those that play the whole guitar neck, the higher up the neck that you play, the more critical this becomes. My favorite bridge thickness has gone from the 3/32 Martin Standard to a .10. I go to a full 100 thousandths. Now, a 3/32 is 94, and you might say, well, what's 6 thousandths? Well, yeah, it's not much, but it's enough. The higher up you play, the more critical this becomes. If you are building a guitar for a bluegrass player who wants a higher action, this is something you have to take into consideration on your build. You may want to go with a 1/8 inch saddle. You may want to scoot things back 30 thousandths more. You won't go wrong putting a 1/8 inch saddle in. Also have to consider over time what's going to happen. This bridge will want to, oh yeah, I take the bridge upstairs. What's going to happen, the bridge is going to roll. When that rolls, this saddle is going to literally shorten the compensation length. So that's something else you want to consider. All of this has to be taken into consideration to compensate that saddle for the condition of that guitar. There is no one compensated saddle for all guitars. It doesn't happen. It can't happen because you have different playing conditions. So just to recap this, A, scale length. B, gauge length, and sometimes that can or cannot play that big of a part depending upon alloy. Age of the strings. As the guitar is played longer, usually you will find the B and the G strings to be more difficult to be in tune. One other point you want to listen to is when you're playing a note and you hear maybe a zitarish type of a buzz. Is it in the open position? Yes. Fret it. Do you still have it? Yes. Check saddle. Usually what will happen, the saddle has a slight radius. As the strings bite into it, especially bone saddle, they'll create a little bit of a groove. Metal will not bend at a given point. It needs an arc. So you may have to put a little bit more radius on the back of the saddle. So you fret the note, hit it, sitar's gone, open, bang, it's back. You have a problem with the nut. Bill Tippin taught me very early in my career that the nut is probably the most overlooked part of the guitar during a setup. I just told you, a string will not bend at a given point like a classical guitar string will. So think of the bottom of this nut slot as a roller. Alright? So the string comes up across the nut and you kind of match this arc. Have you ever had a guitar, you've made a nut slot and you angled the bottom of the nut to pretty much follow the headstock? What's going to happen, the string's going to come out of the nut and it's going to have that arc. And until that finally breaks down, you have a hard time keeping it in tune. That's when you got to go up here and take a look at your nut. They are, once you learn these basic little tricks, you can take your setting up of a guitar to a whole new level. Learn to identify. If it's fretted and the problem's gone, it's in the saddle. If it's there when it's open, it's in the nut or the saddle. If it's there and gone when you fret, you know it's the nut. If it's there after you fret, it's in the saddle. So I hope that explains a little bit what you need to do with compensating a guitar. My best advice on a new guitar is to get a cheap plastic saddle, stick it in here, throw your guitar strings in, let it sit for a week. Let the guitar become a guitar. Then maybe want to play with your action adjustment on that plastic junk saddle. Now you know where to take the bone, start it, and work your way down. My favorite way to set up a guitar is going to be, number A, I'm going to check my relief. I want to know what the clearance is here at the 7th fret when I have a dead line from the 1st to the 12th fret. Martin's spec is 4 thousandths to 10 thousandths. I've actually had them play it dead flat. It depends on your playing style. But for the most part, if I see a 4 to 6 thousandths, I'm happy. If I have an adjustable truss rod, you can actually take it dead flat, get your setup, break it back a little bit, and find the relief that guitar needs to be. I get to do a lot of work on like this one here, which is what they call a T-bar or non-adjustable truss rod. That non-adjustable truss rod, one is in this here, and this one, okay, right here, I think you can see it. This is a piece of steel that is in shape of a T. You see that? Okay. That's in the neck, and we have to do what we call compression fretting. We would actually take a fret tang that's a little bit heavier than the slot in order to get a back bow in the neck to compensate for the string load that's going to come back in. When I compression fret, and we are going to make a video on compression fretting in the future for you at Blues Creek Guitars. The object is to use the neck and the mechanics of the neck. Compression fretted necks are going to have either the T-bar, it's going to have a square tube, or an ebony. What makes compression fretting difficult is you don't know how that neck's going to react right away because the barbs have to see. My favorite trick for setting a compression fret neck was I'm going to go to 10, 8, 6, 3. And I will put in, I'll measure the slot and go 1 thousandths over. I want to see between a 7 and 10 thousandths back bow in my neck. If I do not see that with those few frets in, then I'll do a couple more. Once I get the fretting where I want it, I'll go in with, let's say my fret slot is a 20 thousandths, I might go in with a 19.5 because with the barb it will bite. Once I let that sit, I tend to put weight here, 2 5-pound bags of salt or sugar, let that sit on there, let it sit for 24 hours, 48 hours, give the barbs a chance to bite before I do anything. Then I will string it up, and I'll let that sit probably a week. Give everything a chance to bite in, because I may have to pull a fret or two to make an adjustment or to relieve it. With that being said, remember, it's all about the prep. Get the fingerboard prepped, get your fret prepped, take your measurements. First one's the difficult one. Once you get over that, you're going to learn real quick. New saddle's easy to make. If you're building your guitar, and this will be for the kit video, guys, if you put a straight edge on the neck, you can see, you hear it, I'm just a hair above my bridge. That is what you want to be. If you are building your guitar and it's sitting down here and it's down into this point of your bridge, you're in trouble. You gotta have at least, I like to see about a 32nd, no more than a 16th. All that's gonna come into you, you'll get it. Put your bridge in, check your harmonic. If you need to adjust this, ABCs of doing this again. Let me run over it. Relief. Measure the action at the 12th fret. I like to see on my first setup what I call a 2-3 action. 2 32nds on the bass E, 3 32nd at the 2 32nd on the treble, 3 32nd at the bass. ABCs of any setup is A, you want to do your relief. B, you want to check your action. 2 32nds on the treble, 3 32nds on the bass. Whatever you have to adjust off of your saddle would be double. If you need to go down a 32nd, you have to take a 16th off. When you're all done in the perfect setup, 3/8 of a bridge, 1/8 of a saddle. Once you have those numbers established and you get the action height to where you want it, and that's key. Get the action height to where you want it and that it plays. Now you can adjust your intonation. You can also compensate your nut if you need to, but going from the 0 fret position, bump if you're sharp, make it a little bit longer. If you're flat, you're kind of screwed. You're going to have to compensate up here at the nut. Most parts, if you're using a stock fretboard, you should be fine. I have found that usually the B will have to get a little bit of compensation, and sometimes the A. If I have a perfect, if I get lucky and have a match of the gauge and everything, I don't even need a compensated saddle. It doesn't really help me. I have a few guitars like that, not many. So remember, B, A are usually going to be your most adjusted string. So I hope that helps you. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your support. Please check us out also at the Kick Guitar Forum. The Kick Guitar Forum is all about sharing information. I hope you come and visit, and we'll see you next time.